All right, welcome to my channel, Duck Potatoes World. My name is Katie, aka Mrs. Duck Potato. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are new, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. Tonight, or today I guess, I am going to attempt to make a no-show heel tab sock on Lottie. This is a different kind of sock than what I've shown in the past, but the same skills apply to this sock as other socks that I've made. We're just kind of applying the heel creation to a different part of the sock to make a heel tab on the cuff. So let's get our setup on it. I made a sock yesterday and I dropped a stitch and didn't notice it in time to fix it. It went way down, so I pulled the whole sock off the machine thinking, well, I'll just start over. And it was really kind of fortunate that I did, because once I pulled the sock off the machine, I discovered that apparently I had put the heel tab over the instep instead of over the heel. So that sock would not have worked anyway. Let's see, I'm looking for my waste yarn. Here it is. I'll try really hard not to bump the camera, folks. Using my large weight for this kind of sock. You want a pretty snug fitting sock with shorty socks so that they don't slide around in your shoe. You want them to stay put. I will have to refer to my notes so I remember how to make this sock, because like I said, I already made its mate earlier today, and I want them to match. Alright, I am going to use a contrast color for the heel tab compared to the rest of the sock. I'm going to have a pink heel tab, and the rest of my sock is going to be self-striping highlighter colors. Now, I'm going to be hanging this hem, so I am going to mark the parts I'm going to hang with little, I don't know what to call them, stitch markers, stitch flags, little bits of scrap yarn so that I have an easier time hanging the cuff later. Now, normally when I hang a cuff, I have many rows of knitting and I'm just going and hanging the actual stitch purl bump. But because I don't have many rows of working yarn, because this isn't like more like hanging a toe, I actually am going to pull up the bar between the stitches, and that's what I'm going to flag. So there's my first one right over my main mark. You don't have to do this. You could skip flagging and just pick up carefully. But I find I have more success if I go ahead and flag these little bars. I just find it easier. Oh, I also needed to turn on my row counter. So I'll have to remember that I have one row already done because I did not turn my counter on at the right time. If I can get it to count. No, I missed it. So I'll just have to remember that when I would normally want to do 10, I'm only going to want to do 9, and so forth and so on. here I am just flagging, oops, not very successfully I might add. Trying to work around a camera makes it a little harder. It's not usually this difficult. I'm just flagging over the marks. This is the halfway mark for mine. Flagging right over the marks. This will help me hang the cuff in a little bit. Seem to be missing a flag. Been using these all weekend, so I don't know what I did with it. Thought they were all sitting over here. Oops, sorry. I know I was going to bump that. I was trying not to. Found my flags. There we go. All right, so I would normally knit 10 rows with my heel spring on. I'm only going to do 9 though because I didn't turn my row counter on for the first row. I'm going to show you how to manually count rows just in case you ever do this to yourself. You can do this the same way with hand knitting and machine knitting, but what you want to count are the ladders in between stitches. That'll give you the most accurate row count. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've done 10 rows. Now I am going to do the heel tab, and it's literally just like doing a heel. I'm going to take out of work the same stitches I would normally take out of work for a heel, but this is going to be smaller, so I'm going to actually take out 5 extra needles, and I'm going to work a tiny little heel just over these few stitches. Turn my row counter off for the time being. My heel spring is already on, so I'm just going to start lifting out of work and head toward my target marks. It's like a tiny little baby heel. I will add a heel fork. Usually for me, 1 is enough for this little heel tab. I don't usually need to put all 3 on there. The camera is literally sitting right where I sit when I work my machine. So you're getting very close to the view I have when I work. So if I bump the camera again, I'm sorry in advance. It is literally sitting between my arms. So here I've gotten to my target marks that I would use for normal heel. Complete those. And then just like I would for a heel, I'm going to push and wrap back to my starting point. Oops, I want to push so hard that my latch is closed. That will not do me any favors. And I am not returning all the way to my main or halfway marks. Instead, I'm returning, like I said, just to where I started from. Whoop, there, I did it. I knew I was going to bump that. I'm so sorry. I actually have my heel tabs marked with a gold marker, but it's kind of hard to see. I've done something wrong because I have one before the gold marker here. So at some point I've failed to do something I should have. This is just a heel tab, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop one and then wrap. I've gone past my marker a little bit, but it won't hurt anything. Don't know what not sure what I did. I'll have to, but it's not that big a deal. It's just a little heel tab. Then I'm going to put all of my needles back into work. And from here, I'm going to crank another 10 rows, and I'm just going to leave that single. Here you can see clearly I skipped something right here because there's a big old hole, but that's okay. Won't hurt nothing. From here, I'm going to crank 10 rows again. And I got my row counter on. Now, if that were an actual heel, I would go back and fix that because that would drive me nuts. But in this fold over cuff, I don't even think it's going to be noticeable after the thing, isn't it? Alright, so there's my 10 rows. Now I'm going to hang my cuff. Fishing this thing out is difficult. This is one of the things easy to mess up by knocking stitches off needles while you're trying to fish out your weight. So just be very careful, and I'm holding the bottom of my bonnet so it doesn't just pop out. I don't remember what I was doing, but I managed to pull a whole bunch of stitches off the needles. I think I was knitting a tube. It's probably in one of the other videos. And there's my hair. My hair gets knitted into my work all the time. Just a little bit of extra. Alright, so now here I'm going to use these little flags to hang my stitches. And I'm going to take the working yarn here, the tail of the working yarn, and I'm actually going to knit that into the next round. So I'm going to pull that one out as well. All the rest of this can just stay poked down in there. So here's my next flag, and I'm just going to hang it. You're going to pick up these cuff stitches just like you would if you were doing a toe-up sock. It's the same exact process. I just find it a little easier if I use the flags. Now I have no weight in my machine, so if I crank, I'm going to want to hold things down with my thumb. Otherwise, stitches will go flying everywhere and we'll be starting all this crazy stuff over again. I like making shorty socks. I have never worn handmade shorty socks this short, so this will be fun. I made 2 pairs. I've made, like I said, several pairs, but I gave them all away because when I first started making shorty socks, I had a hard time getting them to fit. Oops. And so they kept coming out too big for me. So people with feet that I love that were bigger than my feet kept getting them. But I have finally kind of figured out how to make them fit. The instructions I have for this, the pattern I have, just says knit your normal number of foot rows. For me, that's usually around 60. But for some reason, I didn't believe it. And so I was trying to use a row converter based on gauge, and when I did that, it just came out too big. So sometimes you just need to shut up and do what the pattern says. Trust the designer. When I just did what she said, they came out fitting just fine. So c'est la vie. Just like hanging a toe. Pucker pink toe. This yarn is called Pucker. It's a Knit Picks Stroll, I think. Something like that. I'm going to watch this because when this comes around, I want to catch it in my yarn feeder. I'll show you so that it gets knit into this next row. And then I don't have any toe to weave in, or any toe. I have to Kitchener the toe at the end and weave that in. But I don't have anything to weave in the cuff. It'll all be caught right up in there. And this is also different from when you hang a cuff down sock. Otherwise, because you notice I'm not, or when I hang a cuff for a toe up sock, I'm not having to raise my needles. I hope that made sense, y'all. Words are hard sometimes. Apparently. This is one of those times. I'm leaving all of these needles in work. Ooh, that one got really stretched out. That is less than ideal. So you can see how stretched out this stitch is and how tight some of these other stitches are because of that. So I'm just gonna loosen them up a little bit so that I can find them in a minute. The other side probably needs to be loosened a little as well. Don't know how that got quite so pulled out, but there we go. That should fix it. You want to be able to find all of the little stitches there because I'm gonna need them. You don't want to miss any. I missed one in the other pair of socks I made. I told you that pair was a problem pair. I dropped a stitch, put the heel tab over the instep instead of over the heel. I forgot to make a deep heel on one of them, so they're slightly different sizes, but they'll be okay. I dropped a stitch when I hung the cuff on one of them that I still need to repair. So I don't know if it actually just popped off the needle or if I just missed one and didn't pick it up. Fortunately, I saw it later and was able to stick a stitch marker in there so it didn't run. But it's definitely a thing I'll have to fix. And I'll just probably string a piece of yarn through it and tie it off and call it good. But that other pair of socks was Trouble. I still don't have my weight in, so I'm going to hold things down. I'm leaving my row counter on because I'm going to do 5 leg rows, the first of which will be pink, and then I'll switch out my colors and start my main yarn. This one can be a little hard to find, but you just look carefully. It's right there. Alright, so my cuff is hung. I can put my weight back in. I'm at 10 rows. Here's 11. When I get all the way around, I will go ahead and swap out the yarn. And I'll do 4 more leg rows because this is a shorty sock. I don't do a whole lot. It should be an identical sock, I think, to its mate. We'll see if I did things the way I should have. It will be identical. Oh, I want to leave my heel spring on. I always forget and take the heel spring off. I don't know when. I guess I take it off when I finish the heel. I don't know what I do. Oh no, I take it off when I switch colors. That's what I do. And then I forget to put it back on. Alright, and that's it. That's the cuff and the leg. Super short. Now I am going to make a regular heel, except it's going to be extra deep. So I pick up all my needles that I would normally do, and I'm going to make it extra deep, so I'm going to drop down 2 on each side. Then I'm going to continue with the heel. Alright, already I'm doing things wrong because I should have raised that. So we'll go back and raise it now. It'll be a little wonky, but it'll be okay. And I do with any other heel, I just add in my heel forks whenever they're needed. I will need all 3 heel forks for this one. A little squeaky. Lottie is starting to protest. I'm sure she's wore out. We've made, let's see, I think this is the 5th pair of socks and 5 sock tubes in about 3 days. What happens? She doesn't get used for a long time and then I pull her out and work her to death. Don't I, Lottie? Dropped a stitch right there. Catch that before it runs. So hold that down out of my way. Definitely don't want to ever go faster than your eyes can pay attention, because if you drop heel stitches especially, that's usually like, if you don't catch them real quick, that's a starting over mistake. Fortunately, I saw it and caught it right away. There we go. Now, this stripe yarn is Night Owl Fibers. I love her self-striping yarn. I have bought lots of it. I believe this colorway is called Hop Into My Scotch or something along those lines. All right, and now we're gonna go down and wrap. I always drop 2 the first time because Dean and Bean says it prevents dog ears, and I assume they know what they're talking about. That's one thing I don't think I've ever forgotten to do. So I don't know what it would look like otherwise, but I'm happy with the way it looks like following their directions. And again, I did an extra deep heel, so I need to remember to go actually 2 needles past my halfway and main marks. I'm saying that out loud more to remind myself than anything else, because I have a bad habit of forgetting that on this sock because it uses a slightly different heel than I usually do. would love to know what camera angle you guys prefer. I've gone back and forth in between my arms so that you're looking at the cylinder the way I usually sit and look at the cylinder, or from directly in front of the cylinder, which is where I think most people sit when they crank. I just can't sit there because of the shape of my office. And at this point, I'm so used to sitting at the handle that I think it would confuse me if I tried to move. All right, so this is where I would normally end a heel, but we're not ending the heel just yet because this is a deep heel. We're gonna go a little further. Now, the hardest thing about this sock is when you finish the heel and you go to reset your C-clamp so you can reset your soft weight. That is the hardest thing about this kind of sock. Because, as you recall, we have a whole 5 rows of leg, and we have this thick cuff part that's sticking out, well, right here. You can't see it because the waist yarn's in the way. And I've got to catch all of that up in my ring. So it's kind of like when I was a kid, there were these little toys. Let's see if I can remember what they were called. Well, I can't remember what it was called. But it was like a little dolly or a set of dollies, and you would smush them into a little thing that they lived in. Kind of like I'm about to do with this cuff and heel. So if I get my C-clamp under there too tight, I just want one click. That was too many. If I get more than one click, it's even harder. Come on, one click. There we go. So I want it to be, I slide it up and then I stuff. First that little heel cuff thingy, which I can feel under there. Once I get that one stuffed, then I can start stuffing all these heel rows that we just made. And it's never going to be perfect, but you just stuff in as much as you can. And turn your row counter back on and crank your foot rows. So I'm going to crank my first foot row with just my hand so I can see what's going on and make sure everything looks good. I'm going to actually trim this while I'm thinking about it from when I changed my color. Well, actually I'll do it later. I am leaving my heel spring on, which is a thing I don't normally do, but is part of the instructions in the pattern. And then I'm just cranking the rows I would normally crank for a sock for me on this cylinder, which is, like I said, about 60. And the first 2 ones I tried to do, I tried to get a gauge and use a different number, and they were always too big. So you have to watch it because that clamp and all that stuffing down there will get stuck on your gear going down in the tube, so you have to watch it. It also gets caught on the heel spring in the back. You can't see that part. One of these days I'm going to set the camera up where you can see everything, but don't know when that day will be. If you want to, when you get so far, you can actually go back down and reset your ring up a little higher, which I like to do. Get it past that cuff and some of the heel fabric here. Ah. Maybe. There we go. Still just do one click, but now I can stuff all that heeled up in there. It will be a little bit better. Keep stopping because my arm's getting caught on my heel spring. That is my foot. Now I'm going to turn the toe. So that is just like a regular heel without the extra. I've already got my heel spring on. Adding my heel forks here shortly. Is that it? Yeah. It's time to add these forks. sleeves are just like heels, with one very minor exception, and I will point it out to you when we get to it. I got a heel fork falling out here. Don't want these to hit the ground. They will break if they hit the deck. I have broken them that way in the past. Oh dear. I bopped these with my elbow. They should not be down. And now, of course, they're stuck, and I'm going to lose stitches. Darn it. If you have to move your arms over something, you should always check. I don't know if I can wiggle these. All right, so that's stinky. These should be up, and they are not up. And I am not convincing them. Alright, so that is going to go down and that stitch is going to fall off. So I am going to attempt to, I'm going to let both of these, in fact, catch this orange yarn, and then I will fix them. That will keep them from falling. Then I'll show you how we're going to fix it. So you can see those are not supposed to be knit. All I'm going to do is lift up very carefully and slide that purple stitch that was knit, that I didn't want knit, back over and onto the needle. Ta-da! I'm going to do it again very carefully because this is a double stitch. And I want both parts. There. Save the day. Now, what were we doing? Pushing down and wrapping. Let me go put this back on where it goes. There. Watch where my hands are going. Alright, so here is how this is different from a heel. Normally, when I push this down for a heel, I would wrap both of these to close up the hole, but I'm not going to do that for the toe. I'm going to leave the hole. Same thing on this side. I would normally wrap the working and out of work needle, but I'm just going to wrap the working needle. Alright, I'll put all these down. I'm going to leave all my weights and things in place. Alright, now I want about a yard of yarn, which for me, I'm 5'6", so a yard is about from my fingers to my nose. So that's how I measure it. I could pull out a ruler or a yardstick if I really wanted to, but I don't want to. I'm going to use this to Kitchener up the toe here in a bit. So I'll tuck that down in there. And then I am going to need some more waste yarn. My waste yarn is white, unless I'm using scraps, just because I hardly ever knit anything white, so makes good waste yarn. And we're not gonna wrap and hug the needle. We're just gonna lay it on in there. That's it. And I'm gonna make about 10 rows. I don't see that big old gap. It's okay. We will take care of it later. So I'll do a couple of rows, and now I'm going to actually use some light bulb stitch markers to mark my work. Oh, I'll hunt some down. Apparently mine are all in use on the other socks that I haven't Kitchenered the toes on yet. Story of my life. I have 8 million stitch markers and I can never seem to find one when I need it. I like to use different colored stitch markers for these two on each side just because it helps remember which one's the top and which one's the bottom later. So when I go to Kitchener it up. Don't want the waste yarn, I just want the project yarn. I have not found a truly easy way to do that. I almost always snag something I shouldn't, but it'll be okay. This one's easy because it's all stretched out. So those are just saving the spaces for later. Oh, that one is not in the right place. See how it's got that white yarn caught in it? After I said how easy this one was because it was all stretched out. There we go. And you can tighten this up if you want to. But there. I'm going to do this side. It's not as stretched out, but you're doing the same thing. We're just catching the last project stitch on each side of the halfway mark. Ooh, there we go. Alright, then I'm just gonna give myself about 10 rounds of waste yarn. Wow, that normally snips a lot easier than that. Oh, there we go. That's what I get for trying to use my left hand, I guess. Go ahead and take my heel forks off because, like I said, don't want those clanking to the floor. And I'm just going to catch this as it comes off the machine. My soft weight hits the floor. That's not a big deal. Okay, this hot mess is what just dropped off Lottie, the baby she just gave birth to. So you can see here's this would have been the part that was connected to Lottie's cylinder. And you can see here how I've tried to stuff the cuff and the heels down into this ring, which we can take off now. And we will flip it wrong side out because we're going to remove the setup bonnet, which I placed with ravel cord on purpose so that it's easy to take out. So I will just kind of pick out a couple of stitches of ravel cord so that I know it's not caught on anything or tangled. Like that. And then I just put my hand into the bonnet and pull. And it pops right out. And now my bonnet will come off, but you got to be careful. Like here, you see I've snagged my waste yarn apparently with one of my cylinder needles. So we're going to lose that ply of waste yarn, which is no big deal. That's why we use waste yarn. But here you want to see, you can see I've got a couple of stitches that are connected. You don't want to just pull this because you could unknit the end that you knit in. You just want to gently unknit it with your that way it stays nice and tight. Let's see, there's the end right there. Now I am going to sink that little green tail into my cuff with a tapestry needle. Any sort will do. I have 400 over here. Let's see if I can get one to come out of the... Yeah. Well, I got one and then I dropped it. Try again. There we go. So this is really a lot bigger than I need for this task, but that's okay. I'm just going to slide it on into here, into this cuff. So make sure you're not poking out the other side, because then your end would go out the other side. I don't want to do that. I want to sink it into the cuff. It's not a very long end. Just poke that through.
Roxanne, move it.
Doo, doo, doo.
Roxanne, up.
Apparently my dog is misbehaving, so sorry if you can hear that.
Out of his bed. Out. Out.
There. So I have my cuff done. And now I am ready to Kitchener the toe, and then I'll have my little sock. Here's the mate that I made earlier today. Same thing. And you can see, sure enough, I told you if I had done everything right, I should have a pair of identical socks, and it looks pretty good, like I do. I have a little bit of yellow on this one that I didn't seem to get to on that one, but pretty darn close, if I do say so myself. And there's my little tabs in the back of the heel, not in the instep. I'll put a picture in of the sock I knit yesterday with the heel tab in the instep so you can see what I'm talking about. And while we are looking at these socks, here's the pair I made yesterday. And remember I told you when I hung the cuff, I missed a stitch. So, hopefully you can see it, but right there is the stitch that should have been knit to this stitch down below it, but is not. And I caught it before it ran. And so I'm going to fix that real quick. Won't be hard at all. I'm just going to take a piece of extra yarn and a tapestry needle, a smaller one than the one I was just using to sink that end, because that'll be way too bulky. Alright, so I just have a tapestry needle threaded, and I am literally just going to tie these off. Just tie them together. That's all I'm going to do. Did not think through that. So I have my tapestry needle threaded, and I am going to use, actually, instead of my tapestry needle, I think I'm going to use my latch hook. Okay, so I have just a piece of scrap yarn and my latch hook here. And I am going to just tie this off. I'm going to take my latch hook, insert it into both stitches, pull up a loop, and just wow. Just pull it up. So now I've tied these two together. They are not going to go anywhere. I can take this off, and I'm literally just going to sink these ends into the cuff, just like I did on that other one, but with a smaller needle this time. I found the smaller needle. If you have trouble threading needles, I'll show you how I did that when I do the other end. Tracy taught me a pretty good trick, so I'm just gonna make sure again that it's not coming through on the other side of your cuff, because you don't want it to poke through. But I just gonna bring it through. And then pull. And I'll just stretch and it'll hide right back in there. So I'll show you how I thread this needle. So I just fold the yarn over the eye of the needle and I apply pressure up. I pull up on it and I pinch. And then I remove the needle and I pinch, 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 and then it makes it kind of flat, and then I can just slide my needle over it. Boop. It doesn't work perfectly every time, but it works really well most of the time. And then I'm going to sink, oop, I poked through. Keep my fingers on the other side of the cuff so I don't poke my needle through to the outside. Bring my needle out there, and ta-da! I fixed my little drop stitch. If you're really sensitive to bumps or knots, you might be able to feel that, but I am not. I'm not going to notice that at all. So yeah, I just need to Kitchener the toes for the 2 pairs of shorty socks I made this weekend. I Kitchener from the wrong side, so I'll actually hold it this way and Kitchener the working yarn together. I mean, I'm going to use this tail that I left over here, but yeah, going to Kitchener that together like that. So that's what they look like wrong side out. These are right side out, but I'll turn them wrong side out when I get ready to finish them. All right, there you go. So I hope that that was useful information. I really like these socks. I will hopefully enjoy wearing them. This is the first time I've made some that are my size, so I can't tell you for sure, but I like all my other knitted socks, so I can't imagine me not liking these. Thanks for hanging out with me. You guys have a great day.